It's that time again when all the watch manufacturers compete to wow us all with their latest and greatest watches. But will 2024 just leave us wondering if it was all worth the wait? Here's a complete list of every watch you need to know about at this year's Watches and Wonders show, including some you probably missed. If last year's big surprise from Rolex was the puzzle dial, believed to be in support of autism, then this year's is that the much anticipated Coke GMT has been switched out for a steel, black and grey bezeled version instead. Based on the black dial, green GMT hand of the very first ceramic GMT, this new edition is in fact, after all, a Coke GMT, but instead one that pays respect to the 300 million people in the world who are colourblind. Rolex's continued support of the differently abled is admirable, however that still doesn't forgive the ongoing use of the old Submariner case. Anyone deeply familiar with Rolex lore will immediately recognise the shade of ice blue on the dial of the newest 1908, and will be quite right in suggesting that it indicates the use of platinum in the case. What's unexpected is the dial texture, which seeds a return to the guilloche last seen on the outgoing Cellini. Here that pattern radiates from the small seconds counter as a rice grain motif, engraved via engine turning and bordered with a crimped edge like a Kit Kat, presumably to keep the freshness in. This prestigious finishing technique will of course be limited, not by Rolex per se, but by the eye-watering price of 29,600 Swiss francs. Without any hint of irony, Rolex introduces its second biggest watch, now in solid yellow gold, as bringing light into the deep. Far be it from me to criticise, but gold has earned a reputation over the years for being one of the most dense and therefore heaviest materials on Earth, making this newest iteration of Rolex's Mega Diver just slightly behind a neutron star in mass. To complement the yellowness of the gold is a blue dial and blue ceramic bezel, and for the first time, the front element of the ring lock system is in ceramic too, here coloured blue. Actually, I have to eat my words about lightness, because Rolex has chosen to maintain the use of titanium for the gas escape valve and case back portion of the ring lock system, reducing weight and making the watch entirely wearable. As part of Rolex's bid to move the brand up market, we're seeing a selection of the presidential favourite, the precious metal Day-Date, added to the collection. In white gold, there's a pale mother-of-pearl dial reminiscent of clouds. In yellow gold, there's a white lacquer dial with faceted hand-finished Roman numerals. And in rose gold, there's a slate gradient dial that Rolex refers to as ombre. Rolex CEO Jean-Frédéric Dufour, a Tati fan, confirmed. This old money watch aligns with a recent statement from Dufour that comparing watches with stocks is wrong and dangerous. After all, everyone knows only poor people need to sell stuff. It's a similar story with the Sky-Dweller, which gains new yellow and rose gold models with white and grey dials respectively. Hopes of a perpetual calendar edition after Rolex filed a patent for a simplified version of that mechanism have been quite rightly dashed. Who do you think this is? Patek Philippe? So it's out with the old and in with the new for the Rolex Daytona, because the centenary Le Monde Daytona with its Paul Newman exotic dial and 24-hour chronograph has been discontinued after less than a year and been replaced with this, a white gold, mother-of-pearl, diamond-bezeled thing. If your eyes can bear it, there are two variations to choose from, the black mother-of-pearl on the Oyster bracelet or the white mother-of-pearl on the Oyster Flex rubber. It's a choice, like getting kicked in the head or the balls. But wait, there's more, because the Le Monde isn't gone for good. It's back in yellow gold instead. Is this the first time gold comes runner-up to silver? Trust little old Tudor to come to the rescue in the face of disappointment with the Coke GMT, because here it is, the one we've all been waiting for, a 39mm GMT watch in red and black with a date, a Rolex-style crown, and most importantly, it's not as thick as a dictionary. Yes, this 12.8mm deep watch is all things to all people, resplendent in its gold accents and stainless steel frame, even resisting the temptation to write all about it on the dial. There's one gotcha though. Due to legal reasons, the red portion of the black and red bezel can't be described as red. It's burgundy. So not Coke, but cherry Coke. The Black Bay 58 in 18 karat gold doesn't get a new hat, but a new belt in matching 18 karat gold. This has pushed the price up to an eye-watering 30,000 Swiss francs, which, if you'll recall, is more than the platinum Rolex 1908 we saw earlier. If you wanted any further dissuading, you'll see it's still rocking the same old-style crown, which, compared to the influx of the Rolex style hitting other models, looks ever more like a ship's capstan. The full fat 41mm Black Bay, updated last year in red with a new bezel and crown design, is now also available in a monochromatic black and silver coloration on all 3 strap types, not Oysterflex, not Oyster, and not Jubilee. If I were Rolex, I'd be starting to get a little jelly right about now. Which must be why Tudor was forced to release the Clair de Rose, a watch so fresh from the Argos catalogue I can still smell the print of those thin pages. Hungry for Cartier's cuisine, with the smooth jewelled crown, sword hands, Roman numerals and inner dial guilloche, the Clair de Rose comes in either silver or blue and starts at an agreeable 2,350 Swiss francs. Tudor has even gone so far as to use Cartier's model de brand naming convention, with Tudor's original brand logo being the Tudor Rose. It's the Cartier we have at home. Someone somewhere at Patek Philippe woke up one night in a sweat with the realization that the current World Time watch didn't have enough rings of text around the dial, and thankfully that was remedied in 2023 with a limited edition World Time that added an extra line of info with the date. Well, that watch, imaginatively named the World Time with Date, has made it into the full-time collection, in blue with a guilloched centre and a strap made from an old pair of Thierry Stern's Levi's. At first glance, the red date indicator looks like a thin bead tucked between the date and the city ring, but it's actually suspended on a long, clear hand. As part of the move to shift the Patek Philippe Nautilus away from steel comes another white gold model in the same pale blue we're going to see a lot of from the brand this year. There's that jean strap again too, this time for the 5980 60G flyback chronograph. The more I see that strap, the more I'm warming to it. Without irony, it's good to see Patek Philippe experimenting with chilled strap materials. I wonder if Deluxe could make me one for my Omi Watari. The Travel Time Aquanaut gets the same treatment too, although the strap here is in a pale blue rubber instead. It was only a week or so ago we were talking about battleship chic, and it very much looks to me like this might be the new thing for the Holy Trinity's top dog. Can things get any more surprising than this? They sure can, because the latest edition of the Aquanaut collection in rose gold at the sweet spot size of 38.8mm is quartz. Yes, the caliber E23250SFUS24H will be the nightmare fuel of many a Timpson's employee for years to come, with its button-batteried power edging the prominently painted white second hand along in stuttering steps. In an additional twist, this Aquanaut is also a travel time watch, with a second hour hand for home. There's even a little day-night indicator for home at 6 o'clock. If you want to relive your youth and the agony of learning how to read the time again, then Cartier's got your back with the Santos-Dumont Rewind, a platinum case watch with a red carnelian stone dial that reads counterclockwise. I'm sure you can fill in the words fun and playful ad nauseum at your own leisure. But whilst the Roman numerals are now arranged around the dial to be read in the opposite direction, Cartier have been kind enough not to go full nightmare mode and actually reverse the Roman numerals themselves. There's 3 lacquer dial Santos-Dumonts to choose from as well, in platinum, rose and yellow gold, with green, blue and grey dials. Sounds nice for sure, but not exactly groundbreaking, until you notice they've lacquered the case and bezel as well. By colouring outside of the lines, Cartier have introduced a fresh look for the classic model, with each twinned to a matching strap. Given that Cartier Santos finds its origins in the world of aviation, it makes perfect sense for a dual-time version to exist. Granted, the time zone difference between the house and restaurant Santos originally flew his one-man airship between was non-existent, but air travel has moved on since then, and so must the watch. So for the Santos de Cartier dual time, Cartier splices in a sub-dial featuring a second time zone indicator, giving a 12-hour read of another time zone. If you're not familiar with Vacheron Constantin's Le Cabinotiers collection, it's when someone with enough money to buy a small city looks at the standard lineup and can't find anything they like, and so Vacheron makes them something else. In the case of the Berkley Grand Complication, that something else is the most complicated watch in the entire world. Superseding a previous watch also built by Vacheron, the Berkley gets 2,877 parts for a total of 63 complications, up 6 on the previous record. It took 11 years to develop, adds a full Chinese calendar including New Year date and zodiac signs, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff none of us have the time for me to list here. It is of course a pocket watch to fit all this in, and I'm sure Vacheron won't appreciate you saying it looks like a tin of tuna. For 2024, Jaeger-LeCoultre combines 2 of the most prestigious complications it makes from both ends of the spectrum for the absolute mouthful that is the Duometre Heliotourbillon Perpetual calendar. At one end we have the Perpetual calendar, a slow-moving complication with the patience of an ant, gradually ticking from one day to the next over tens and even hundreds of years, keeping order at the scale of the universe. Then at the other end we have the Heliotourbillon, an absolutely bananas headbanger of a thing that spins 3 concentric titanium cages around like it's seeing if the cylindrical hairsprings got the right stuff. If you've ever looked at a Perpetual calendar and been put off by its inability to keep the date beyond the year 2100, then lift your weary chin because IWC have got your back harder than Goose had Mavericks. This ain't no stinking Perpetual calendar, this is an eternal calendar, and it takes your Gregorian calendar's rules, chews them up, and spits them out in the form of a calendar display that can accommodate the 3 skip leap years every 400 years. So now you can sleep at ease knowing that you won't miss your appointment on the 1st of March in the year 2100. The Constant Force Tourbillon Masterclass from Grand Seiko is back, this time with several long paragraphs about light and shadow, evening twilight and evoking daybreak, because where the previous model used darker tones to give a mechanized industrial feeling, this new edition is brighter overall, using silvery tones to make it gleam and sparkle like something nature. It continues to be one of the greatest watches ever made, and I'm glad I have a second chance to not be able to afford it. Have you ever been redecorating and peeled off the old wallpaper only to take a bunch of plaster beneath with it? Grand Seiko knows that feel, for which it commiserates with you through the SLGW003, whose dial should come with a trigger warning for those who just bought an old lady's house. On second look, it might actually be something to do with the bark pattern of the birch trees that grow in the car park outside the Grand Seiko factory, but potato. What's doubly extra about the SLGW003 is the introduction of the Caliber 9S-A4, a manually wound version of the automatic movement that brings the thickness of the watch down to under a centimetre, while still retaining 80 hours of power reserve. Tag Heuer is coming in hot for 2024 with a watch that costs from $138,000 all the way up to a butt-watering $182,500. The cause of all this madness, the Monaco split seconds chronograph. Now, whilst your typical split seconds commands a premium over the standard chronograph, this watch seems to have slipped in an extra 0. Does it have 1/100th of a second accuracy in a split seconds chronograph? Is it entirely made of diamond? As far as I can tell, there is nothing significant here to warrant such an outlandish price. The first was due to sell at the postponed Only Watch auction with an estimate of around that. That's all I can come up with. The Slender Wars rage on at the highest end of horology, and now it's Bulgari's turn to bite back with the $529,000 Octo Finissimo Ultra, which steals the record from Richard Mille by 0.05mm for a total thickness of just 1.7mm. Thinner than a Mr. Men book, the Octo Finissimo Ultra finds that extra room by removing it from the crystal, presumably discovered by repeatedly wiping off fingerprints with a t-shirt. A tungsten carbide caseback prevents the watch from conforming to the wrist a little too much, whilst the outdated QR code that led to an NFT has been replaced for a pattern from QR rival Data Matrix. Basically, the duration of the Bulgari's record can be predicted based on the lifespan of the techno gimmick it chooses to employ. Setting the watch has been further improved by placing the watch in a cradle that does it for you, which sets the time precisely via the now COSC-certified Caliber BVL 180. These thickness records are getting so close now, they're going to have to add an extra decimal place. Whilst Piaget tapped out of the thinnest watch competition the moment things got weird and the watches ceased to be usable, leaning more into concept territory, it's not stopped with the records. Whilst Bulgari and Richard Mille bicker over 0.05mm in the time-only category, Piaget is classing up the joint with the Altiplano Ultimate Concept Tourbillon, the world's thinnest tourbillon at just 2mm. That's the same dimension as the original Altiplano Ultimate Concept, but now they've managed to squeeze a tourbillon in as well, which is pretty remarkable given a typical tourbillon's layered construction, and doubly so when the watch still retains 2 hands on one dial and a single crown for winding and setting. Here the tourbillon cage has taken on a more unusual form, although it still doubles up as a small seconds, with the flattened cage marked with a small arrow on its perimeter. Price, as you might expect, is on request. The Upper Crust Edition Freak S from Ulysse Nardin gets a splash of the traditional for the Nomad Edition, with a guilloche dial set behind the absolute spaceship of a movement, complete with its twin escapements and outboard differential. It's one of a few combinations we've seen of classical traditionalism and avant-garde madness from the brand recently, showing Ulysse Nardin has still got what it takes when it comes to old-school handcrafted watchmaking. More of this, please. As the cool kid on the block, it seems H. Moser can do no wrong, and they're doing more of that with the Streamliner tourbillon skeleton. I've seen some pretty ropey efforts at contemporary skeletonization in my time, but this shows those losers how it's done, getting rid of as much as possible without making the whole thing as frail as Nana's doily. Different shades of grey are used to delineate certain structural elements that would have E.L. James needing a sit-down. The cardinal sin of skeletonization, leaving the keyless works as a congealed lump of ugly metal, is neatly avoided, but what simply can't be circumvented is how bad my pale, hairy wrist looks through the back of it. There's two things Lange collectors covet most in their watches: honey gold, a proprietary blend that's a little paler than rose, and lumen, Lange's loomed dial arrangements with clear elements that reveal the innards below. So imagine how many tents were pitched when the Datograph Perpetual Tourbillon Honey Gold Lumen was announced. Not only that, but this is already one of Lange's most coveted models, featuring a chronograph, perpetual calendar with big date, and a tourbillon, and now with a little touch of Frankenstein. And they've not held back on the lumen part either, with the date wheels, calendar and chronograph subdials, moon phase, and even the tachymeter scale, glowing like it's got a case of the Chernobyls. Future sci-fi trekheads Dibber-Tune can always be trusted to come up with something wacky and wonderful, although I'm not sure anyone expected the kind of grand complication. And it's more than a kind of grand complication, because this beast houses no less than 800 parts, 60 of which are doing duty in the reversible case that switches between classic and contemporary. As far as Dibber-Tune can be classic, that is. Split between the two is a speedy 30-second tourbillon in titanium, a 3-dimensional moon phase indicator, full perpetual calendar, power reserve, moon age, not 4.53 billion years, the number of days in the cycle, and why not, jumping seconds too. There's a new model in the town of Čapek, and it's called the Promenade. Bringing in the exciting new concept of round, it doesn't at first seem to offer a whole lot of anything original to the mix. Well, that's because you haven't let me finish, because headlining the Promenade collection is the Good Do, or Water Drop, which seeks to lull you into a trance and make you dance like a chicken in front of all your friends with its hypnotic radial dial. The effect is achieved with a 3-dimensional ripple filled in with blue enamel by the good people at Don's Cadran. That's US Nardin's enameling workshop, where the thicker parts read darker and the thinner, ta-da, lighter. You find me a single person in the world that doesn't immediately draw the parallel of a stone being dropped in a still lake, and you'll have found a liar. Given that image, I am renaming this the Čapek Bloop. That's my roundup of watches I think you need to know at Watches and Wonders 2024. Let me know your favourites in the comments below, and any others I haven't listed here. A big thank you to my Patreons for making this possible. Why not consider joining them via the link in the description below? And remember, when you're out driving and there's someone right up your chuff, to keep a box of thumbtacks in the glove box. A handful of those out the window will soon get that gap back. Goodbye.